Well, good afternoon. I'll call the meeting to order, the September 15th meeting of the Oklahoma City Riverfront Redevelopment Authority. And the first item 2 is from the chairman. Do we have any update on any of the committees, from any of the committees? Okay. And the MAPS 3, Brian, any update there?
We will have a meeting next week, or a walkthrough on the Whitewater facility, but that's it.
Okay. Item 3 is the minutes from the August 18th meeting. Any changes or corrections to the minutes?
Move approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Cast your vote. Whoop. That's approved unanimously. Item 4 is the consent docket. We have the sand mining and oil gas revenue report and the Oklahoma River corridor events report.
Move approval of both items.
Kathy,
I have a correction
okay.
on the the sand mining and the oil and gas revenue. Under oil and gas revenue, it says September 2015. Should say August 2015.
So noted.
Yes.
Anything else on them? I think we had a motion. Do I have a second? Second. Motion and a second. Cast your vote. And it passes unanimously. Item 5 is the primary agenda items. The first one is to receive the Oklahoma River Maintenance Projects update. What's going on the river?
Not a whole lot right now. Everything seems to be good. We've got a real short report this month. The only item on the agenda is, or on the report rather, is the replacement of the final cylinders on the Brum Dam. We accomplished that on August 25th. Matter of fact, we did it in about half a day's time. We've become good at it over the last 18 months. As I've mentioned previously, we've replaced all 30 cylinders on all 3 dams in the last 18 months. Here's some pictures. This is the first time where we've had to utilize dual cranes just based on the locations of the crest gates. We did crest gate number 1, which is on the north end, and then we did crest gate number 4, which is out in the middle, and we had to utilize 2 cranes. Here's just a picture of some of the counterweights that they're loading off the transport vehicle onto the crane. And then the next slide actually shows both the cranes in action, and that's the first time we've had to do that. So that was, again, that took a lot of coordination from staff. Now we're going to start working on some of the miter gate cylinders and the drain and fill gate cylinders that are actually on the lock. They operate the lock doors, and then on the locks there's drain and fill gates, which allow water to come into the lock and lift the boats up. And then when they transport, another set of gates opens up and lets the water out and lowers the boat. Then the gates open, and then it proceeds downstream into the lower basin. So we actually bought a number of new cylinders at the time that we placed the order for the crest gate cylinders, and they're in storage. And now that the crest gate cylinders are done, we're going to start work on the other cylinders that are specific to the locks themselves. So we'll initiate that work, in the next month or so. So I'd like to take just a brief moment and recognize the Public Works River crew, the guys in the back. If you guys would stand up. These are the guys that operate the boats. Not only for this type of work, but they do the debris removal, they do special event support for the holiday parade, for the drag boat races, for any of the rowing events. We've got somebody on standby in case there's a piece of debris comes to the surface and we've got to get it out. So they're on call 24/7, much as the other folks are. I wanted to recognize Sam Sladen. He's the River Projects Manager, and on this type of work, he's the guy that has to coordinate the hydraulic contractor, the electrician, the crane operators, and these folks. It's, you know, it's a big effort to, you know, especially on this type of deal. So we'll go ahead and recognize Sam now, but then I'll make sure he comes to next month's meeting, and then we'll give him an ovation too. So if there's not any questions, I just ask that the report be approved as submitted.
Paul, could I ask just for a frame of reference, what does a cylinder cost?
The cylinders that are on the Brum and May Dam, they're identical. Those two dams are identical. To totally take a cylinder off and rehabilitate it, pull the bearings and everything else, possibly return the you know, the big steel hydraulic cylinder, you know, the piston they call it, that moves up and down, is anywhere between $25,000 and $30,000. Now, the cylinders that are on the eastern dam, those will run you about $50,000 apiece to totally redo it. But keep in mind, we're only doing that now probably every 3 to 4 years. So we've completed all the big work, if you will, and now we're going to start on the lock cylinders, you know, the miter gate cylinders and the drain and fill gate cylinders. Those are quite a bit less because they're smaller.
And you've now got this in a rotation, so it won't be 18 cylinders at a time.
Got it in a rotation, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And Paul, the eastern dam has half the cylinders that the other two have, correct?
Right. There's only 6 cylinders on the eastern dam, where there's 12 on both May and Brum. So, but the good thing about the eastern dam is that we can pull the crane right up on the roadway, okay? And you don't have to get, even though the cylinders are bigger, you don't have to get quite as big a crane because you don't have the reach. You can just work off the edge of the roadway and reach down as opposed to out, as you see here. So it's a lot more efficient.
So you're saying we should have built a roadway across every dam then, I guess? Huh?
Well, I should have built the dam at the roadways. It would have been easier. So.
I know I've asked this before, and I'll try to remember it, but years ago when we started the cylinder rehabilitation project, there was I think at one time we talked about having extra cylinders available so that you could rotate out as you pulled them off for rehab. Did we end up with that? Do we have extra cylinders?
We do have extra cylinders. That's one of the primary reasons that we're building the river maintenance facility, is to have an indoor storage location where we can pull a truck through, and we're going to have an overhead gantry crane, load those cylinders onto the truck, and take them to any one of the dams.
Okay.
So that's the plan.
Any other questions for Paul? Motion to receive the report? So moved. Cast your vote. It passes. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Next item is to receive the report on the quarterly meeting of the stakeholders. Pat, anything other than what's in the packet you want to talk about?
No, would simply want to thank University of Central Oklahoma for hosting this meeting. We did have President Don Betts of UCO present, and the topic and focus was the UCO boathouse, which was appropriate. Tours were given to those who were in attendance. So other than that, would simply ask that the report be received as submitted, subject to any questions.
Any questions for Pat? Motion and a second. Cast your vote. It passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Item D is to recommend to the City Council they approve a revocable permit with the Oklahoma City Boathouse Foundation for the Oklahoma Regatta. Oh, maybe I was subconsciously putting that off. I don't know. Never can tell. Let's go back to item C. I didn't mean that, Mr. Douglas. Item C is to receive the Oklahoma River Equestrian Trails Conceptual Plan. To jog everybody's memory, this was requested of our architect group, Triad, to put together this concept plan of how we could do an equestrian project on the river. And the request was put in some time ago. They are ready to submit the report, and the proposed budget for it. I will remind people that this is certainly an item we would like to do it sometime, but it is not currently funded. So when you see the budget, just remember that that's something that would have to be captured later on at some point in time. But I felt it was important to get this report in so people could see what the concept, what the idea was, and what the vision of an equestrian center on the river is, so that when it comes time to start talking to whomever it might be to request funding for it, will have heard it and seen the concept and the vision. So with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, honorable trustees. The information that you received in your packet does indicate what the history of this project was, and actually there are photos at the Historical Society that indicate that horses were ridden along the riverfront back in the late 1800s when Oklahoma City was first founded. So this is an idea that in many ways is going back to the roots. I think the Oklahoma City Chamber and the Convention Visitors Commission both had a hand in sort of accelerating the discussion that led to our work order to get Triad to do a concept. I think what they presented here, and we have several folks here that I would like to recognize. One is Rhonda Hooper was one of those who was present at a chamber/tourism retreat and actually discussed among the group present the need to make good on the promise that Oklahoma City is a horse-friendly city. We are the horse capital of the world, and it's well recognized, but if you want to ride a horse somewhere, that may not be quite so easy. And so it was in part their vision that led us to the point of commissioning Triad to do this study. And so we thank Rhonda Hooper and certainly Randy Hogan. I believe City Manager Couch was present at that retreat, and others. So I think there was a consensus that needed to be done. We have with us today a couple of other folks, both Don and Tiana Douglas, who have led the charge on this project and helped form a committee. We call it the Coalition of the Willing, and it's a group of folks who believe in the notion of having horses along the river, having a horse-friendly environment along the river, and it was with their leadership certainly and reaching out to the community, as well as the technical expertise brought forward by Triad, that have brought us to this point with this recommendation for you to receive the report. With that, I would introduce Mr. Walt Joyce. He's an architect with Triad Design Group, and he will present the technical aspects of the program today.
Thank you, Pat. I would like to get you going in a brief survey of what we've done and welcome you to the Oklahoma River Trails, the equestrian experience. What you see initially is a site plan that pretty much delineates all the different phases combined going both east and west from the site that's going to be the trailhead, which is effectively Agnew, the river to Pennsylvania. That's kind of the core of what is there. And so looking ahead a little bit, this is just very touchy. Can you push the forward button for me, please? Thank you. This particular site shows a little closer in, if you will, from Agnew to Penn, and they're showing what we've defined as suburban routes west and urban routes east. And what we'll be able to do is to take from the trailhead and proceed in either direction a number of different links. So I think what we want to look at next is the initial trail configuration. We're calling it Phase 1. We've zoomed in closer now that you can see Agnew on the left, Pennsylvania in the center, and then the area to the right. This shows the trailhead, the Oklahoma River Trails trailhead, and it is the initial configuration. And as you can see, it goes to the east over to what is the Stanley Draper Memorial Tree Grove. It's not a very long ride necessarily, but the point is it gets the presence going, and a lot of open riding is encouraged in that area. And so if you look a little bit closer now to Phase 1, what we've done here is delineate a starting point. This will get the presence going for all of those interested in riding the river. And so we start with the trailhead, which is in the upper left corner, and we will come back in and modify and resurface the existing parking that's there to accommodate horse trailers because they require a special safety zone around them. So we'll need to go ahead and address that in the first phase. And then, as you can see, the existing pedestrian trail that parallels the river on both sides, and this in the south in particular, you'll notice that the equestrian trail is not attached to or associated with the pedestrian trails, again, as a matter of safety. We don't want to mix the two routes or travel mechanisms, if you will. And so you can see that trail going by both the green and the route. It has a low water crossing. The initial equestrian recreation area is just something if you want to exercise your horse. And then what we want to do is look at Phase 2 as this project proceeds on conceptually. We continue adding mileage to the equestrian trails, in particular to the west in this case. But more importantly, what we do is we start adding some structure, the livery stable. This is an element that will allow guests, visitors, tourists to come and actually rent a horse and be able to experience that kind of experience, as well as a space for an outdoor arena for those who want to bring their own and just exercise them there. In addition, we have added a pull-through parking lot to the south, and what that does is allow additional parking for the trailer world with equestrian, again, that's sequenced for future use. One of the things that is pretty important in this one is the use of a security office and a welcome center. It is a design element at this time conceptually that will allow a sense of security for those there, as well as a welcome center to provide information for those who want to know about horses and that experience. One of the big things that you see there is the Stockyards Landing. We feel is that that's a very important link to what is already on the river, and it's always been an element in this particular conceptual plan is to allow visitors on the river to hop off at a landing, come experience it, and at some point even visit down into the Stockyards link. So with that in mind, I'd like to take you to Phase 3. Phase 3 is its final version, and as you can see on the south side, we continue to add additional parking, and part of the reason is that at this particular phase, we are adding an enclosed arena. It is in no way going to compromise or compete with anything of the horse world at the fairgrounds. We have been a partner with them from the beginning, and we're on board together as this is a good thing for the whole community. And so with that said, the other item that we've added, we've found some interest in arena polo. The site isn't big enough for the whole open arena for polo in its full-blown form, but the arena polo is catching on, and so at some point this would be a great venue for it as well. The mileage markers are something that's very simple. It defines the trail. They're easily maintainable and allows flexibility. The next slides represent a conceptual vision, and I'd like to reinforce it's conceptual, but the first four show what might happen from an aerial viewpoint, and then the second slide we get a little closer. For example, on the upper right, you see the main entry level with the livery stable. Lower left is the welcome center, security, etc. And then finally what you see there is the overall of what it would look like with all of the phases in place. And then finally, I'd like to talk about the costs at the conceptual level. The first phase, as was mentioned, one of the biggest ticket items up there is enhancing and preparing the existing parking lot to accommodate the need. It's in disrepair now, so it's a pretty expensive item. However, the trails and the livery, those items are really pretty economical, and to get water there for the benefit of horses and tourists both. That particular phase is right now at about $430,000, and it will get this initial thing rolling, create the presence, create the interest, and all of those items that will hopefully lead to the completed project. Phase 2, the livery barn, that's where we bring in the ability for guests, tourists to rent horses and enjoy the trails. We also have, if you'll remember back on the slide for Phase 2, the Welcome Center, the security office area. Small items for extending the trails, those are the economical items. The additional parking on the south side, which is pull-through parking, landscaping maintenance, and then we have, of course, we all know the stockyard landing is an important element that you see there. At this point, we bring in some more utilities for a total Phase 2 of roughly $4.2 million. And the final phase is where we bring in the indoor arena. It's about $7 million. Pretty big item at that point, but it's the major element that we've got. We add additional smaller elements, including the arena polo fields, and additional pull-through parking and a pavilion, miscellaneous items. That particular phase is right at $9 million, and this has been a whirlwind tour of our vision, conceptually, of the equestrian side of the Oklahoma River Trails, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions, comments?
In Phase 1, who was our market?
I'm sorry?
For Phase 1, who were we? Who was our identified market? Is that Rhonda? Is that you on a Saturday afternoon?
Gianna and me and Rhonda and everybody who wants a horse. We need a place that, well, we don't. We would love to have this opportunity to ride our horses. We're all equestrians.
Yeah.
And so it's that kind of individual that already lives here that will take advantage of this, in my opinion, and our opinion, actually.
Okay.
What's the separation right now, do you see, between the pedestrian trail and the equestrian trail?
For the most part, it should never be closer than 12 feet to the edge.
But what kind of barrier? Will there be a barrier or something?
No, it'll be, we'll have the trail markers that define the equestrian trail, and then we have, obviously, the hard surfaced. There are locations where we will co-mix, and that is where there's a bridge that crosses a canal, and at that location we will sign it in a manner that sets priorities, as you might find on any trail anywhere. And so those the only places that we will commingle are at the actual bridges, and there are very few of those.
So are you anticipating boarding horses there?
No, not boarding so much as the rental for the livestock, for the horses at the livery stable. It's not to say that it won't be available for those who travel with horses, because we have found in the existing stockyards area a great facility that's very it's of the same character and style as older barns, and it's there. We know that it's there, and we're thinking, well, it may be an option at some point that we can include it. It's been in the discussion, but it's not currently shown.
So what's the capacity for trail ride or something if you were going to do them? What are you anticipating the capacity being in terms of number of horses or something?
Oh, I would say that probably the stable, is set up right now to house about 16 horses. Right about 16 horses in the livery.
When I was in some of the meetings, we talked about allowing this to be a venue where people could come do a cookout.
I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the really fun things about this is the stockyards connection. We envision, for example, maybe, and I don't mean to single anybody out, but cattlemen's might have a chuck wagon that they could bring on the stockyards connection trail to the venue, where at the outdoor arena maybe we can have dinners, cookouts there, or maybe even a children's rodeo there, or a country music venue, for example. And the whole idea is to connect and make viable that connection between this and what's already there and well known as the stockyards.
So how do you anticipate these being managed? Is this being subbed out to a private venture, or is this done through the city? And where other cities have done this, is this self-sufficient after you get the capital, or is this something that's always subsidized?
We would find a vendor or a person that would contract the delivery operation. Other than that, for example, the facility for safety and security would be manned by, for example, the Sheriff's Department. The facility would be provided under the project itself, the Welcome Center. All of these kinds of things are planned for, I think the only contractual area outside of what you might think of would be the delivery contract.
Any other questions or comments? I think it's just, personally, I believe it's just another piece to the river. I think it's something that would benefit not only the city to have available, but for the river and certainly the stockyards area. I know the time I spent on the Convention and Visitors Commission, we'd hear stories about people that would be coming through, not necessarily coming to a horse show here, but just would be coming through and want to know where they could stop and get their horses out and exercise them and feed them and water them and, that kind of thing. And there's really not a good place to do that along the interstate. And so I see a benefit to this. I know the Stockyards has talked for years about not necessarily the equestrian center, but just having a landing there and being able to utilize some system to get people up into the Stockyards and back down to the river again. And I think this would just really complement that. So I think there's a lot of great things going on here. Again, that's why I wanted to get it out and get the vision out there so that we could start talking about it and hopefully see it come to fruition in the years to come.
Dennis, how does the cost of the landing at $1.5 million relate to the other? Is that docks that we've done already? Is that ballpark?
As far as I know, it's pretty much in line with others other lands that we've looked at.
Walt, I have a question, and it's my ignorance, but can you break the phases up? Like on phase 1, could you do the trailhead and the utilities and then come back to do the existing?
Absolutely. What we've done is we've on purpose designed the flexibility in to shuffle these around in any manner. There's nothing in stone that says it must follow these. A good example might be that we have a team that would love to have arena polo. Well, then that would reshuffle the deck, in other words, to provide flexibility in this whole setup.
Any other questions? Very good. Thank you. Appreciate it. I need a motion to receive the River Equestrian Trails Conceptual Plan.
So moved.
Second. Cast your vote. That passes unanimously. Now on to item D. Recommend the council approve a revocable permit for the Oklahoma Regatta Festival, October 1 through 4. Motion? And a
I have a
second.
question.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
As I read through this, I understand most acronyms, but I have a new one in here that I do not understand. It's MUT, as in Tom, CD, guidelines. Could somebody educate me what that means?
Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices.
All right. No. No. Thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion? It passes unanimously. Item E is to recommend to the City Council approve a limited revocable rowing and paddle practice use permit with the Oklahoma City Boathouse Foundation for use of a portion of the Eastern Basin, October 1, 2015 through September 30, 2016. I understand this is a renewal of an existing permit. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and second. Any questions? Cast your vote. Passes unanimously. Item 6 is the claims docket. Move approval. Any questions on the claims docket? Cast your vote. Passes unanimously. Item 7 is additional items. Comments by staff.
Mr. Chairman, members of the trust, you might have noticed that our Parks Director, Doug Cupper, is not in attendance today. He's away at a convention. But we have our newly appointed and hired Assistant Parks Director, Melinda McMillan. So she's in the back. If you haven't met Melinda, she's been on board as Assistant Director about 6 weeks? 2 weeks. Maybe this seems like 6 weeks. Anyway, glad you're here.
Welcome. Any other staff comments? Pat, you have anything on your Director of Development report other than the written document?
Would be happy to have it received as submitted, subject to any questions you may have.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Maybe I missed some. Where are we on is there a river parade this year?
As far as I know, there is, yes.
Okay.
I know that the person putting on that parade was looking at, I believe he still has the original date reserved down there, which is the Friday after Thanksgiving.
Okay.
But I know he was looking at some replacement dates, thinking about maybe moving it to a Saturday in December, but I have not heard if he's officially done that. So, yes, there'll be a parade. We just haven't got an official date set yet.
Thank you.
I will make sure that we push that to be announced shortly. Any other questions? Motion to receive his report.
So move.
Second.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Any comments by trustees? Larry?
Yeah, Gary, where do we stand? We're kind of not talking about where we stand money-wise, and the sand mining report looked like it was rather dismal. Is there a plan to address our financial condition?
For the overall revenue situation?
Yeah.
Pretty much? Yes, I was going to, after the meeting that I missed was you got a report on the finances, expenses, and revenue and so forth. Put together a small committee of trustees to start addressing some revenue possibilities or decreasing expense possibilities, one or the other, or a combination of both. But I'll be putting that together. We'll be talking about it. It is something that's very serious. Lord knows what oil and gas is going to do, and we still have not got anything from DeLisi on the second site for sand mining yet. So we are in a decreasing revenue situation.
DeLisi has drilled, I believe, about 50 boreholes on about a 300-acre site, but they have not, and they're analyzing the results from that testing, and we have not heard back. We expected to hear back from them a couple of weeks ago, but we have not. And Pat's been in contact with them in the last week or so.
Any other questions? Any comments from citizens? Very good. We are adjourned.